So let's remember how fortunate we are in relation to the vast majority of other living beings on this planet and throughout the universe, because of having a human life, human body and mind, good health in body and mind, and ideal circumstances, conditions in which we can learn the teachings. We've been extremely fortunate to have encountered the Buddha's teachings in this lifetime. Not everyone has a chance to do that, because these teachings show us how to purify, pacify all suffering and the causes of suffering, and to cultivate all the causes of happiness, from ordinary happiness up to the highest form of happiness, the state of enlightenment, awakening, Buddhahood. These teachings are just inexpressibly precious, and we've been able to meet them and learn them and open our hearts to them and start practicing them. So we're really, really, really fortunate. Let's make this session of learning about the Dharma, and in particular the practice of the 35 Buddhas. Let's do this for not only our benefit, but the benefit of all living beings who've all been kind mothers and fathers and the source of all our happiness, from having food to eat to the chance to practice Dharma, develop giving, ethics, patience, and so forth, and all the causes that we need to reach enlightenment. So we can't reach enlightenment without other sentient beings. So let's open our hearts to them and do everything we do with the motivation of reaching enlightenment, becoming a Buddha, to help all of them. Make that the motivation for participating in this session. Okay. So I was asked to give this talk today because there are some people who will be starting their preliminary practice of doing prostrations. But this is also a practice that is done every day at the Abbey. It's part of the Abbey's daily program. And probably most of you have heard teachings on this many times, but it doesn't hurt to hear them again. You might hear something new. So, as far as I know, all the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, the Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Gelug, have this tradition of what are called ngundro, or preliminary practices. But each has their own way of doing them. And one of these preliminary practices is prostrations, doing prostrations, which are usually done 100,000 times. But that's just the minimum, you don't stop after 100,000, you keep going. And in the Gelug tradition, the tradition is to do your prostration ngundro, 100,000 prostrations, with this practice of the 35 Buddhas. And these practices, ngundro practices, preliminary practices, are done for two purposes. One is purification of negative karma and afflictions, obscurations, to clear away the negative stuff that we've accumulated in our mind. Because if we don't purify that, if we don't clear it away, it can interfere with our practice and our ability to attain the results of practice, realizations, especially emptiness. Also, to be able to engage in more advanced types of practices, such as Tantra or Mahamudra, Dzogchen. These are, really high practices, and it's important to clear away things that could interfere with our ability to do those practices successfully. So that's one purpose of the Ngondro, is to clear away the negative energy. And the other purpose is accumulating positive energy, merit, which I like to think of as fuel. Like if you have a car, it can take you somewhere, it can take you a long way, but not without fuel. You need fuel to be able to go somewhere in your car. So in a similar way, to be able to make progress on the path, we need the fuel of positive energy. Now, that's just my own analogy, but for me it helps. This is what enables us to actually get moving along the path. And so among the Ngondro practices, there's things like taking refuge, Guru Yoga, Vajrasattva, prostrations, there's various numbers, mandala offerings, and so on. The practice of 35 Buddhas is mainly, and doing prostration, is mainly for purification, but it's also for accumulating merit. It's also a way to accumulate a lot of merit. So it's good for both. And I don't know, has anyone heard like what the other traditions, like the Kargyus or the Nyungas, what do they use when they do prostration? Has anyone heard? I haven't had a chance to look that up, but I don't know. Maybe they do 35 Buddhas as well, but I don't know. I haven't looked into that. But I found something. So there's a number of books, a number of resources for this practice. This is one published by the FPMT. It's called The Preliminary Practice of Prostrations. And so it contains a number of different teachings, mainly by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, benefits of making prostrations, a commentary to this practice of the 35 Buddhas, and so on. So it's got a lot of nice information in here. And I just found this note. He says, he's talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's life story. And he says that, I haven't heard much about his having done many 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, but he did do many hundreds, thousands of prostrations by reciting the 35 Buddhas' names. It said that he did 3,500,000 prostrations. So that means 100,000 for each of the 35 Buddhas. And Rinpoche says, so I asked Dhammalocha Rinpoche about this, and Rinpoche said, this is because if you do the practice of confessing downfalls, that's this practice of the 35 Buddhas, if you do this even one time well, it purifies the 5 uninterrupted negative karmas, sometimes called the 5 heinous actions. So in the Lama Tsongkhapa tradition of lineage lamas, they put so much effort in their daily lives, doing so many hundreds of thousands of prostrations. So it seems this is very much emphasized, the practice of reciting the 35 Buddhas. And so that's the reason. Lama Tsongkhapa himself did it a lot and said it was very, very powerful, very beneficial. Something else he said here. Oh yeah, another thing he said. It's good to do at least one session a day of this practice in the morning, as it is said that having done prostrations to the 35 Buddhas, all subsequent prayers and virtuous actions of the day will be more successful. So that's, again, it's part of the schedule here. So we're very fortunate that we have the chance to do this practice. So there's 2 copies of this book in the library. I found 2. There might be more than 2, but maybe during the retreat they could be left out somewhere. There's going to be a place for resources. Yeah. And also, if anyone wants their own copy, you can get it from the FPMT Foundation store. There's a e-copy, soft copy, e-book. Yeah, you can get an e-book. And there's another book. I found one copy. It's called The Confession of Downfalls, and it's published by the Tibetan Library. And originally, a long time ago, I think, 1980, originally, it was published with a different title, Mahayana Purification, and it had a different cover, orange cover. And I actually looked for it in the library catalog, and it said there was a copy in the guest library, but I couldn't find it. Do you know where it is? You know where it is. Is it a book or is it a photocopy? Like, does it look like? But with an orange cover. Okay, so that means we have 2 copies at least. Okay, so they can be put out as well. And I also checked on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon too. Because normally these books from a Tibetan library are hard to get. They're published in India, but you can get it on Amazon. There's new copies and used copies. Well, this is a really cool book because it has the original sutra. The practice of the 35 Buddhas is actually a sutra. It's called the Sutra of the 3 Heaps. So this book contains, it's basically just the same, but it's the sutra, translation of the sutra. And there's also a commentary by Nagarjuna to this sutra and to the practice. And there's also commentary on the practice by Geshe Darge, who is one of Venerable's. He was my first teacher. I took refuge with him, and one of Venerable's teachers as well. So again, it's a commentary on the 35 Buddha practice. So there's some nice material in there. And there's also another book. I can't remember the title of it, but it's a commentary by Geshe Jampa Gyatso and published by Wisdom Publications. There's probably a copy in the library, but I just don't know the name, but we can look for that later. Anyway, there's a number of resources, lots of information, and I won't have time to go through all of it today, but I'll just try to cover the main points. So next slide. So why do we do purification? It's because we have lots of bad karma that needs to be purified. So I thought it'd be helpful to just review some of the points about karma. Again, probably most of you have heard this before, but it doesn't hurt to review it. So one way of teaching karma is to talk about these 4 general characteristics. And so this applies to all types of karma, good karma and bad karma. So the first general characteristic is that karma is definite, meaning that good karma leads to happiness and bad karma leads to suffering. Now, what do we want? Do we want happiness or do we want suffering? So I'm sure we don't want suffering, so we should try to avoid creating bad karma and create good karma as much as we can. So that just makes sense. But sometimes it's just hard to do. Afflictions come up in our mind and we find ourselves just carried away by them and create bad karma. Also, before we met the Dharma, we lived a number of years and probably created some bad karma. And that's just this lifetime. But then there was past lives, many, many countless lives in the past where we probably created more bad karma than good karma, and we're still carrying that bad karma with us. So that will bring suffering if it's not purified. The second is that karma multiplies, meaning that each karma, each action doesn't just bring one result, but brings many results. And those results can ripen over a long period of time. Some can ripen in the same lifetime we do it, or in the next life, and so on. It can carry over thousands or millions of lifetimes. So that's another reason why we need to purify. We don't want all those bad results. But on the side of good karma, that's good. Doing one small virtuous action can lead to a huge number of good results. And the third characteristic is we don't experience the result if we don't create the cause. We don't have suffering if we don't create bad karma. We don't have happiness if we don't create good karma. So with regard to bad karma, sometimes people think, I haven't done anything bad. I'm not such a bad person. I don't have to worry about bad karma. But we do have suffering in this life. We get sick, we have problems, and we're living in a world, especially now, especially this year, with lots of problems. COVID and economic problems and political problems and so on. So just the fact that we are in this world and dealing with all these problems is a sign that we do have bad karma. We have bad karma, and it ripens in our lifetime in the form of these different kinds of unpleasant experiences. So, if there's that much bad karma, there's probably more as well that we don't know about, that we don't remember having done, but it's most probably there. And the last characteristic is that karma is never lost. When we do an action, it's the imprint of the action stays in our mind, life after life after life after life after life, until it ripens. And there's only two exceptions to this. In the case of bad karma, we can purify bad karma. And in the case of good karma, unfortunately, that can be damaged if we generate anger or wrong views. So we have to try to avoid that. But we can purify our bad karma, and that way not have to experience the results of it. So that's why we need to know about purification. Next slide. And then there's more complicated aspects of karma. Each action has different facets or different aspects that will determine whether it's more or less complete and heavy and serious and so on. So a complete karma is one that has all four of these aspects complete. And that's the heaviest type of karma, if all these four aspects are complete. So the four aspects are the basis, which is usually the object of the action. Like in the case of stealing, if you steal, what you steal, what it is you take, the goods that you take. And the intention, that has to do with our state of mind. And that has three different aspects. One is the recognition, which usually means you have to have a correct recognition of the object that you're dealing with. Like stealing, if you're going to steal something, you have to correctly recognize that that object doesn't belong to you. We do sometimes make a mistake. We pick up something thinking it's ours, but it's not. But so then it wouldn't be a complete act. So we have to clearly know that object does not belong to me, and I want to take it. And the motive is, to actually have the intention to steal. So it's not that you do it accidentally without awareness, but you intend fully to take something that doesn't belong to you. And then the mental state has to do with, if in the case of bad karma, there would be an affliction involved, like attachment or anger or ignorance. Those are the three poisons. So one of those, or could be more than one. At least one of those is present, motivating our action. And in the case of good karma, there would be the absence of any of these afflictive states of mind. So just to give an example, they usually talk about these much more with regard to bad karma, not so much with regard to good karma, but virtuous karma also has 4 aspects. So for example, the first of the 10 virtuous actions is abstaining from killing, refraining from killing. So in that case, the basis would be as a living being that we could kill. Like a mosquito lands on our arm. Maybe we've killed them before, so there might be the impulse to kill it. That's what everybody else does, or mostly everybody. So there's a living being, that's the basis. And the recognition would be that is a living being. It's not just a piece of fuzz or something. It's a sentient being. And the motive would be to not kill it. I am not going to kill that. So you have to have the intention to not kill, to abandon killing, by understanding that killing is wrong. Killing brings suffering, brings problems. So it's not a good thing to do. And then for the mental state, there would be the absence of a delusion, absence of hatred, absence of attachment, absence of ignorance. At least ignorance here means ignorance of karma. You know about karma. You know that it's bad karma to kill. So you're not ignorant about that. And so you intend to not kill. And then the deed is actually doing the action. So here it's non-doing. You make the effort not to kill. You could do it, but you purposely do not. You just blow it away instead. And then the completion in the case of not killing is making the final decision to avoid killing and probably feeling good about it. That was a good thing to do. So there's a lot to these with regard to each of the 10 virtuous actions and the 10 non-virtuous actions, but we don't have time to go into all of those, and we probably learned them all with Venerable children. The next slide are the 4 results of a complete karma. So that means if we commit an action with all 4 of those parts complete, basis, the mental state, the deed, and the completion, then there will be 4 results that come. So this is kind of an illustration of one of the principles of general characteristics of karma. The karma multiplies. It is in the case that one action brings one result. One action brings many results. So the first result is called a fully ripened result. And this refers to a rebirth state. So if we do an action that's complete, full, with all the 4 parts complete, we have created the cause for a rebirth. And that rebirth would be an unfortunate one if it was a bad karma. So rebirth as an animal or as a hungry ghost or in hell, depending on, how heavy the action was. And then when we create good karma, the result will be a fortunate rebirth as a human being or as a deva. And then the second result is called the result similar to the cause in terms of experience. So what that means is after that rebirth has finished, then in another rebirth, subsequent rebirth, we will have experiences that are similar to what we did. So in the case, for example, of killing, if we did the act of killing, then we might find ourselves being killed, being, the victim of a murder, or having a short life, not being able to live a complete long life, or having a lot of health problems, just being sick all the time. Those are some of the results of having destroyed another being's life. You yourself have the experience of your life being shortened or ending tragically, and so on. So those are some examples of that. And the third is the result similar to the cause in terms of action. So that means having the tendency, the kind of natural instinctive tendency to do that action again. So in the case of killing, having killed, then there's this instinctive tendency to kill again, which you can see in animals, but also sometimes in people, sometimes little children. Without being taught, they just like killing insects and little animals and so on. It's just like coming from inside of themselves, this wish to kill, this delight to kill. So from the Buddhist point of view, that's because of having done it before. And then the opposite, having not killed, having consciously refrained from killing, then there would be the kind of instinctive tendency to respect life and save life and cherish life, which again you sometimes see in little children without being taught. Just really, they can't bear any violence, any harm to other living beings, and want to really take care of and cherish other beings. So that's the third result. And that's actually, in the case of like bad karma, they say that's the worst result. Because having the tendency to do the action again and again means that you keep creating that karma again and again, and you keep, circling through the same problem, same suffering again and again. And the environmental result, the fourth one, is being born in a place with certain conditions in the environment that are related to the action that you've done. So in the case of killing, for example, you would find yourself in an environment where there's a lot of violence, war, unhealthy conditions. The food and the water are not healthy, medicine isn't effective, and so on. But as a result of not killing, you find yourself in an environment that's just the opposite, very peaceful and healthy food, healthy water, healthy air, and so on. Yeah. So the environment we find ourselves in will reflect the kind of karma we've created. There seem to be a lot of fours here. So the next next one are 4 powers. And so this is how to purify. Okay, so when we learn about karma and think about karma, we get really interested in purifying our bad karma. And so we've all heard about these 4 powers before, but in volume 2, what's it called? Foundation of, we haven't come to this part yet, but there's a quotation in there from a sutra called the Sutra Showing the 4 Dharmas, where the Buddha talks about these 4 powers. I found it really nice to see the Buddha's own words about these 4 powers. So it's on page 303 of that book. And the Buddha says, Maitreya, when a bodhisattva mahasattva possesses these 4 powers, they will overcome any negativities they have done and accumulated. What are they? They are the power of regret, the power of the antidote, the power of resolve, and the power of reliance. Buddha's own words. So the order of the 4 powers isn't always the same. They're sometimes in different orders. The way I've put them here is the order in which they occur in the practice of the 35 Buddhas. But in other practices, they might come in a different order. So it doesn't matter which order it is, as long as you get all 4 of them. That's really important. Okay, so the first here is reliance, which in the context of Buddhism is taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. So reliance, the analogy they give is if you fall down, like slip and fall on the ground, in order to get yourself back up again, you rely on the ground. You lean on the ground to pick yourself up again. So the very thing you fell down on, you rely on to get up again. So they say when it comes to negative actions, there's two main objects in relation to which we do negative actions. One is the holy objects, like the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or spiritual teachers, or holy objects. So some of the negative actions that we do are in relation to those holy objects. And so if we do something negative in relation to those, we rely on them in order to clear that up, to pick ourselves up from having fallen down and get ourselves back on our feet. So that's why we take refuge. So taking refuge is to kind of renew our positive attitudes towards the holy objects that we may have acted negatively towards. And the other object that we might do negative actions in relation to would be sentient beings. That's probably most of the negative actions we do are in relation to other sentient beings. And so to purify those, we generate bodhicitta, or renew our bodhicitta, our intention to help others and not harm them, and work for enlightenment to help all of them. The way I think of this power is because I think, people who are not Buddhist, I think, can also do purification. But for them, they might need to change this power of reliance. They don't take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So, people belonging to another religion have their objects of refuge. They don't use that terminology, but Jesus or Allah or whoever they take refuge in, whoever they rely on as their guide. And some kind of wish to be good and do good and help others. So just renewing their commitment to those values, would be an equivalent for non-Buddhists. And then people who are not religious at all, I figure most people do have some set of values that they try to live by, that they regard as important in their life. And they sometimes fall away from those. They go off, go astray from those. So the power of reliance could just be getting themselves back on track, reminding themselves of what their values are, how they want to live, and renewing their commitment to that. So that's how I explain it in a more general way for people who are not necessarily Buddhist. The second is the power of remedy. And this is doing something positive or virtuous to counteract the negative energy that we've created. So it's said that in general, anything that's virtuous can be the power of the remedy. But there's 6 practices that are particularly recommended. One is to recite the names of Buddhas. So that's what's done in this practice, in the 35 Buddhas, reciting the Buddha's names. 2 is reciting mantras, like Vajrasattva mantra, but any mantra, Shakyamuni Buddha mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. 3rd is to recite scriptures or sutras, such as the Heart Sutra, or any sutra. And the 4th is to make images of Buddhas, or build stupas, or monasteries, or donate. Yeah, you may not be able to build one yourself, but you can make a donation. And the 5th is meditating on emptiness, and that's actually the best. That's the number one practice, although it's not easy to do. Not everybody would be able to do it, but that's the main thing that really purifies, is understanding emptiness. And the 6th, making offerings to Buddhas or stupas. So those are the 6 best practices to do as the remedy. But it's also said anything virtuous can be done. So one recommended practice, especially for killing, is to save animals, liberate animals. That's done a lot in Asia, buying animals that are going to be slaughtered and then setting them free so you save them from being killed. So you can see then in the process of doing purification, this one in particular, we're creating virtue as well. And not only are we purifying, we're also accumulating virtue, because these are all virtuous actions. And the third power is regret, feeling sincere regret, which isn't the same as guilt. Guilt is like feeling, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so horrible, very negative self-view and feeling. So it's not like that, but just recognizing that something that was done was unwise, unskillful, because it leads to suffering from oneself as well as for others. So that was a dumb thing to do. I'm sorry I did that. So yeah, this shouldn't involve beating yourself up, hating yourself, thinking you're horrible. So let the ego be out of this situation. Thinking there's a permanent, inherently existing I who just did this horrible thing, and therefore I am permanently, inherently horrible and bad forever and ever and ever. Yeah, so that kind of feeling is not regret. Regret is just, oh, I did something, and it happened because of many causes and conditions I didn't have control over, but now I feel sorry that I did that. I feel regret that I did that, and I want to do something constructive to purify it. Fourth is resolution or promise, and this is making a promise to not do it again. Okay, so we'll go through the practice of the 35 Buddhas and show where these 4 powers occur, but that's not the only practice you can do to purify. You can purify with other practices like Vajrasattva or Shakyamuni Buddha or Chenrezig. So, or just do the 4 powers on your own and then do something virtuous, do something positive, constructive to purify. And this is a nice formula, that how the 4 powers counteract the 4 karmic results. Have you seen this before? I found it in one book, but it's not. I couldn't find it in Foundation of Buddhist Practice. So the power of reliance is said to purify the environmental result. Power of remedy purifies the fully ripened result. That makes sense because we're doing something virtuous, creating good karma, virtuous karma, and that will, overcome the non-virtuous karma that could result in a bad rebirth, an unfortunate rebirth. And the power of regret, I can send you this afterwards. You don't have to type it all down. Regret is counteracts the result similar to the cause in terms of experience, having a similar experience to the action that we did. And the power of resolution is counteracts the result similar to the cause in terms of action. Now that makes a lot of sense, because if you make the promise not to do that again and you're really sincere about it and really try your best not to do it again, that will stop that tendency, the habit to do the action again. So I find this helpful, to think that if we do all these 4 powers really sincerely, genuinely, to the best of our ability, then we can purify all those 4 karmic results that would come otherwise. So I was thinking, actually, the power of reliance could also relate to the fully ripened result, because they say that taking refuge will prevent us from an unfortunate rebirth. So even if we have the karma to have an unfortunate rebirth, which we probably do, but taking refuge, especially at the time of death, will stop that karma from ripening, so that we don't go to an unfortunate rebirth, but a fortunate one instead. So it seems like there's also a correlation there between reliance and the fully ripened result. Okay, so that's just reminders about karma and why we need to purify, and how we purify with the 4 powers. So let's start looking at this practice. So again, it's based on this sutra of the 3 heaps. And the sutra is basically exactly this practice. It starts off with, I take refuge, and then reciting all the names of the Buddhas and so on. So it's exactly the same as the practice. And just some background to the sutra, how it came about. So in Nagarjuna's commentary, he says that it originated from an instance when 35 bodhisattvas who were beginners, that means they were on the first 2 paths, not Aryas, but ordinary beings, they went begging and caused the death of a beer seller's son. In order to lay this downfall bare, or confess it, they urged the superior disciple Upali, who was one of the disciples of the Buddha, right? Upali, to request this sutra from the Buddha, and thus the Buddha taught it. And when this sutra was first requested, the Buddha radiated light rays, which, for the sake of those bodhisattvas, invoked the appearance of 34 fully awakened beings, 34 Buddhas, from the 10 directions, along with a multitude of others. They remained there in space while the penitent bodhisattvas, after making offerings and generating the awakening mind, went for refuge. The disciples prostrated and laid bare their wrongs, and by doing this only once, were purified of all evil and rose up to the first spiritual level as well as higher levels. So I guess that means they attained the path of seeing, became Aryas and higher. You who live subsequent to this event should create a mandala and make offerings before images and paintings of these Buddhas, and then, having performed practices such as activating bodhicitta in accordance with your teacher's instructions, you should make confession. By doing so, all wrongs will be cleansed, and as a result, you will attain the completely perfected, fully awakened state of being. So that's where this practice came from. And the title is the Sutra of the 3 Heaps, or it's like skanda in Sanskrit. And the 3 heaps are, this is in Geshe-Ngo and Darge's commentary. I can't remember if Lama Zopa Rinpoche mentioned it as well, but the 3 heaps are confession, dedication, and rejoicing. And so those three practices of confession, dedication, and rejoicing are included in this practice. But in Nagarjuna's commentary, he explains the 3 heaps a little differently. He says they are confessing, rejoicing, and then making requests. But it wasn't quite clear to see where the making request came in. But anyway, we'll stick to the first version, the three heaps. And so before we start looking at the actual practice, the next slide, It's also said that just reciting the names of each of these Buddhas purifies a huge amount of negative karma. So I won't go through all of those, but they're in this book. Actually, it's in this book as well, Geshe-Ngo and Darge's commentary, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche goes through each Buddha. Just to give you an example, the first Buddha, who's actually Shakyamuni Buddha, by reciting that name, 40,000 eons of negative karma are purified. So that means each time you recite that Buddha's name, then that amount of karma is purified. And another example, the fifth Buddha, leader of the warriors, by reciting that name, it purifies 1,000 eons of negative karma, and also karma created with speech, especially idle talk. So we probably have a lot of that. So anyway, if you're interested, you can find that in the commentary. Each Buddha will purify different amounts and also different types of karma. Okay, so we start the practice by visualizing. So I used my iPad and took photos of the tanka in the meditation hall. So if you, I was going to ask you to have a blue prayer book with you. Somebody want to get some copies of the blue prayer book so we can read it? So we start by visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha. There's actually different ways to visualize the Buddhas. In Nagarjuna's commentary, he explains it such that each Buddha looks different, has different shape or different color, and holding different things in their hands, and they're in different places. So that would be a little more challenging to learn 35 different ways of visualizing Buddhas. But this way, the way that it's in the Blue Prayer Book is explained by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and I couldn't find anywhere where he explained where it came from. If it was, I don't know if he just invented it or he got it from some of his teachers. But anyway, it's a kind of more convenient way because you only have to visualize 5 different forms of the Buddhas. So anyway, we start by visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha, as usual, with golden color and so on. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, imagine in his heart is thousand-armed Chenrezig. That's not mentioned in the Blue Prayer Book. So I guess it's optional if you want to do it or not. I like that it's in the Tanka. And I like thinking of Chenrezig there because it's like the compassion of the Buddhas, from their compassionate heart, these other Buddhas emanate to help us purify. So then from the Buddha's heart, where is thousand-armed Chenrezig, come 34 rays of light, and each one will emanate one of the other Buddhas. So it's on page 56. So the light rays kind of go down, and then the 34 other Buddhas are in 5 rows, and each Buddha has the form of one of the 5 Buddha families. Now, I just read a footnote recently in a book called Mastering Meditation. It's a book about Mahamudra by Chudan Rinpoche. And there's a footnote that says that this term Dhyani Buddha, we always talk about the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. Apparently there is no corresponding term in Sanskrit or Tibetan. In Sanskrit and Tibetan, they are called the 5 Buddha families. And that term Dhyani Buddha was introduced into the English language by this man named Brian Hodgson in the 19th century. And I looked him up. he was an English civil servant who lived in Nepal for a number of years. And so in his writings, he started using this term Dhyani Buddha. And it just became part of our English way of talking. But apparently in Sanskrit and in Tibetan, there is no such term. It's interesting, isn't it? It's probably not a problem to keep using it, but it's just good to know that it's not a authentic traditional term. So that, yeah, they're called the 5 Buddha families. And so all the 35 Buddhas are seated upon thrones that are decorated with pearls and supported by white elephants. Now, this is a detail that you might not want to bother about, but I kind of like it. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, the elephant is the most powerful animal, so it signifies powerful purification. And because pearls are white, and Lama Tsongkhapa says that purification is more powerful if white is visualized. So we usually visualize white light when we're purifying. So having white elephants and white pearls on the throne is a symbol of purification. Okay, so the first 7 Buddhas, the first row of 7 Buddhas are in the aspect of Akshobhya, one of the 5 Buddha families, and he's blue in color. And his hand gestures are the same as Shakyamuni Buddha. So the left hand in the lap and the right hand on the kind of earth touching. And the exception is the 3rd Buddha, who's called King with Power over the Nagas. He's got a blue body but a white face. I don't know why. I haven't heard an explanation of that. But all the others are totally blue. Only he is partly white. And then the next row, again, 7 Buddhas, and they have the aspect of Vairochana. And he's white in color. Now his hand gesture is, it's not so clear here. In the blue prayer book, there's drawings on page 58. So Vairochana is right in the middle, and it looks like his hands are like this. Kind of like this. I don't know. But in this drawing, in Lama Zopa Rinpoche's commentary, he says that according to Serkon Rinpoche, the hands are in fists, one above the other, with index fingers pointing upwards. The upper fist is holding the index finger of the lower. So if you look, it's not so clear here, but if you look at the tanka, it does look like that, kind of. I guess this tanka was painted according to that. I don't know. Maybe this one's easier. Yeah.
I looked into this a little last year because I was wondering about this. And one thing I read was that the hands are in a form of like holding 2 Dharma wheels towards each other. The index and the thumb touching on both hands, and then those like that. So I don't know. There seemed like there was a lot of variations when I started looking at it.
Yeah, I think there's probably many different traditions. So you choose. But yeah, this one in the blue prayer book is probably the easiest. It's not too complicated. Okay, and then the next row, 7 Buddhas, and they are in the form of Ratnasambhava, who's yellow in color, and his left hand is in the lap, and the right hand, kind of like Tara. It's the mudra of giving. So the palm facing outwards. And then the fourth row, 7 Buddhas in the form of Amitabha. So that's kind of easy, the meditation mudra, both hands in the lap with the thumbs touching, and red colored body. In the last row, the 5th row, 7 Buddhas in the form of a Mogasiddhi, green in color, and left hand in the lap in the meditation, and the right hand this is called giving protection. It's a bit like the American Indians, peace. I don't have any weapon in my hand. I guess it's kind of a universal gesture of giving peace, giving protection, fearlessness. So there's a lot to be said about these 5 Buddhas. They're mainly in Tantra. They're usually in different directions in a mandala, and they represent the purification of different aggregates and different afflictions and so on. So it's kind of a whole complex story about each of these 5 Buddhas. But to keep it simple, we can just imagine the 34 Buddhas in the form of these. Oh, I think I made a mistake. Yeah, because there's Shakyamuni Buddha, he's the first one. And then the first row below him, it's 6 Buddhas in the form of Akshobhya. And then the other rows are 7. So that's how we get 35. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche also recommends having a 6th row with the 7 medicine Buddhas. And they are in the Tanka in the meditation hall, but it's not mentioned in the Blue Prayer Book, so that's optional. So if it's difficult, especially in the beginning, to visualize all the details, different colors and hand gestures and so on, don't worry about that. You can just kind of increase your visualization as you go on. So in the beginning, just have a rough visualization. Just think there's these 35 Buddhas there in the space in front of me. And just think that they're there, and they're all fully enlightened beings, and they're full of love and compassion, and they're there to help us, and radiating light and so forth.
When we are reciting the names of the Buddhas, so we start with the names of the blue Buddhas, do we start from the right or from the left? How do we move?
It's from, as we're looking at the Tanka, it's from the left to the right. Our left to the right, yeah. Also, another teaching I read from Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, he said, you can just visualize the Buddha and think that he is the embodiment of all the objects of refuge, all the other Buddhas and so forth. So just do what you can. That's the important thing. What I always say to people is just feel that they're there, even if you can't visualize them, and that they are there to help you and help us to purify. And also, Rinpoche says it's good to visualize many Buddhas, not just these 35 Buddhas, but many, many, many others. Many Buddhas and other holy beings filling all of space. So just think of the whole space filled with Buddhas. And they are all fully enlightened, and they are also one with your spiritual teachers, spiritual mentors. And really have the confidence that they are able to help you to purify. I'll do that one later, but just to go through the practice roughly. So I just found out today that next weekend is the Vajrasattva retreat, and Venerable children will be giving some of the talks, and other Venerables will give other talks. And the topic of the talks will be talking about the different kinds of negativities that we could have created and need to purify, and that that the prayer, like the 35 Buddha prayer, mentions many of these negativities, like the 10 non-virtues and so on and so forth. So just then the talks next weekend will kind of go into those in detail. So that means I don't have to, I wasn't planning to do that anyway, because there's just not enough time. So I'll just cover the practice in brief. And also when prostrating, it's good to imagine all other sentient beings around you. Again, don't worry about actually seeing them there, but just feel that they're there, wishing that they could do the practice along with you and get purified along with you. So that's a really nice thing to do. And also, if you can, imagine many emanations of yourself multiplied many times. Because Rinpoche says, with each body that you prostrate with, you create more merit. So if you can visualize 100,000 bodies around you prostrating, you create 100,000 times the amount of merit. So we first, after visualizing 35 Buddhas, it's also good to think of what it is you want to purify. So it might be good to spend time beforehand thinking of specific non-virtues that you want to purify. And then set up the visualization. And then do these 3 prostrations together with this mantra, Om Namo Manjushriye, and so on. So that mantra increases the benefit of the prostrations that we do. And then continuing to prostrate while reciting the names of the Buddhas and the confession prayer. So the power of reliance, out of the 4 powers, the power of reliance is right at the beginning when we say, I, so-and-so, throughout all times take refuge in the Gurus, Buddhas, Dharma, Sangha. So taking refuge, renewing our refuge. And we can prostrate while saying that. Here it says just saying it once, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche says to say this one 3 times. And then the second power is the power of remedy. So that starts with the recitation of the names of the Buddhas, to the founder, the transcendent destroyer, the one that's gone, and so on and so on and so forth. So reciting the names of the Buddhas, the 35 Buddhas, is the power of the remedy. So that's the virtuous action that counteracts the negativity that we've... Oh, I can see here that it does mention the 7 medicine Buddhas. Optional. If you wish, you can bow to the 7 medicine Buddhas. So, do you do that in a group? Do you do the 7 medicine Buddhas? Oh, you do. Okay, well, it's just not mentioned in the visualization at the beginning. And then over on page 62, so the first paragraph just talks about kind of calling on the Buddhas. Here it says, all you 35 Buddhas and all the others, all that are existing, sustaining, and living throughout the 10 directions of sentient beings world. So it's clear we're calling on many more than just these 35 Buddhas. Please give me your attention. So then it starts the power of regret in this life and throughout beginningless lives and so on. So there it's going through all the non-virtues that we've created and expressing regret for having done these, realizing that these were mistaken, unwise, and so on and so forth. And then the 4th paragraph down, 1, 2, 3, 4, it says, being obscured by all this karma, I have created the cause for myself and other sentient beings to be reborn in the hells as animals and so on. So that's actually going through the 8 states of non-leisure, like in the teaching on the precious human life. we have the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments. I don't know how they're called here, but 8 freedoms. Freedoms and fortunes. Okay, so the 8 freedoms means we're free from these 8 unfree states. So these are the 8 unfree states mentioned here in irreligious places and so on and so forth. So we're acknowledging that having done these non-virtuous actions, we have created the cause to be born in these unfree states where we would not have the opportunity to learn the Dharma and continue practicing the Dharma. And then the last paragraph on that page is, this is the main practice of regret, saying, I am confessing and accepting in front of all the Buddhas, accepting these actions as destructive. I will not conceal or hide them. And from now on, I will refrain from committing these destructive actions. So that's the power of resolution, the 4th power. So just up to there, we've covered all the 4 powers: reliance, remedy, regret, and resolution. And up to there also is the first heap, the heap of confession. And then, page 63, this starts the second heap of dedication. So this is really nice. It actually, I first learned this practice, I think, in 1975 from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and I really got into it and, memorized it and was doing it every day and really thinking about all my negativity and so on. And it took me a long time before I became aware of this part of the prayer. It's like it just kind of didn't realize, I've created some virtue as well. So then I began to appreciate that. So this first paragraph is talking about virtue, and specifically the 6 perfections. It mentions how I have practiced the 6 perfections and created virtue, roots of virtue. So it says, in this life, and blah, 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 I have created through even the smallest acts of charity, such as giving one mouthful of food to a being born as an animal. So that's the first perfection of giving. And then whatever root of virtue I've created by keeping pure ethical conduct. So that's the second perfection, ethics. And then pure conduct. So pure conduct there refers to fortitude or patience, refraining from anger and harmful behavior and so on. And then the next one is fully ripening sentient beings' minds. So that's joyous effort, the 4th perfection, which is mainly about taking joy in virtue. But in the case of a bodhisattva, it's mainly wanting to help sentient beings, help them to progress along the path. Then the next one, generating bodhicitta, and that refers to the perfection of concentration or meditative stabilization. Because we're in the bodhisattva path, we're not just trying to create concentration, but use our concentration to generate bodhicitta. And then the last one, transcendental wisdom, perfection of wisdom. So just remembering that, okay, we've created a lot of bad karma, but we've also created a lot of virtue in all our lifetimes. And then we dedicate all this virtue. So it says, bringing together all these merits of both myself and others, I now dedicate them to, and here it goes through the 4 kayas, the 4 Buddha bodies, but it's disguised language. So it says, I dedicate them to the highest, of which there is no higher. So that refers to the Dharmakaya, the wisdom truth body, the omniscient mind of a Buddha. So I'm dedicating all my merit that I will be able to attain the Dharmakaya. And the next is to that even above the highest, and that refers to the Svabhavakaya, the nature body, the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. And then the third is to the highest of the high. That refers to the Sambhogakaya, the form body taken to teach the Arya Bodhisattvas in Akanishta Pure Land. And then to the higher of the high refers to the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body to help ordinary beings. Thus, I dedicate them completely to the highest, fully accomplished awakening. So we're thinking about all this merit of ourselves and others and dedicating them to attaining these four kayas of a fully enlightened Buddha. And it says, just as the Buddhas and transcended stories of the past, future, and the present, just as they dedicated their merit in the same way, I make this dedication. I will dedicate my merit in the same way. Okay, and then the heap of rejoicing, the third heap, comes in the next paragraph. It says, I confess all my destructive actions separately and rejoice in all merits. I implore all the Buddhas to grant my request that I may realize the ultimate sublime, highest transcendental wisdom. And then it goes on to pay homage to all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. We go for refuge. So just that's running through the prayer very quickly. We didn't have much time, but yeah, those of you who do want to know more about the practice, this is a very nice book, this one. A lot more information. And also, yeah, there's one whole section in there about the benefits of prostration, so we can go back to that slide. So these are just some of the benefits. He mentions others, but being born in a good state of rebirth with a perfect body, he says the benefit of that, if you have a really beautiful, fantastic body, a lot of people will be attracted to you, and then you can help them with the Dharma. You can teach them Dharma. And the same, having a sweet voice. He says, yeah, there's some singers who have such beautiful voices and millions of people listen to them. So wouldn't that be a great way to teach the Dharma, with your beautiful voice? And then being confident, not being shy, especially when speaking, talking, being able to talk to others without shyness. And then I think the last benefits are pretty clear, pretty self-explanatory. Having the chance to listen extensively to Dharma, lots of opportunities to hear Dharma teachings. Having extensive devotion. It says, by doing this practice, prostrating to the Buddhas with devotion, we create devotion in our mind, increase our devotion. Having a good memory and a clear mind, maybe just from memorizing all these names and all the different colors and mudras and so forth of the different Buddhas, helps your memory. Achieving extensive wisdom and achieving all realizations up to enlightenment. So it's good to know that there are these benefits to doing prostrations, other than just getting fit. I mean, there's that benefit too. It's good. Keeps you fit, keeps you warm. Especially if you're in a cold place and you don't have heating, you can do prostrations to keep warm. And then there's also a section in the book about counting. So, the idea of the preliminary practice of prostrations is to count gradually and eventually up to 100,000. So he gives some advice on if you're doing a prostration retreat. He says start by taking refuge, generating bodhicitta, and really take time to think about what negative actions that you have done and you want to purify, and really generate the 4 powers sincerely. And then visualize 35 Buddhas and continue through the practice. And one way of counting is that, you can do 1 prostration. It should be each Buddha, not teach Buddha. 1 prostration to each Buddha while reciting the name as many times as possible. So ideally you learn the names by heart. You memorize the names so that you can just recite the name while prostrating. And before you learn the names, some people will have a book open on their table, and they look at the name and then they do the prostration, they get up, look at the next name. I suppose another way would be to blow up, have the names on the wall, really big letters. But eventually, there's also recordings. If you have a recording, you can have that playing and, listen to it and recite the names, and eventually you'll know them by heart. So that's the best thing, is to know the names by heart and recite them on your own while prostrating. And because of all the benefit of each recitation of the name, it's good to recite each name as many times as possible while prostrating. So you can make 1 prostration to each Buddha and recite that name as many times as you can. It works in Tibetan. You can do 3 or 4 times in 1 prostration, but in English it's probably not possible because the names are so much longer. But anyway, recite the names as many times as you can while doing 1 prostration. And so then you do 35 prostrations. And if you want to do more, you can do 3 sets of those, and that will be 105 prostrations. So that could be 1 session. 1 session, you could do 105 prostrations. Or if you want to do more, you could just repeat that 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. So as many as you want, as many as you can. I know, I've heard, some people, like a lot of Tibetans and also Westerners, go to Bodh Gaya to do their prostrations. In the wintertime, it's like, the whole area around the Mahabodhi Stupa is just full of prostration boards and people doing prostrations. You can hardly find a place to sit. And some people say they can do 2,000 or 2,500 a day. That they're probably young and fit, and they're there from really early in the morning until late at night. So, but I think here you might just be doing 1 session a day or 2 sessions a day, and that's another way of doing it too. That's how I did my prostrations, was 1 session or 2 sessions a day while I was doing other things. So then it can take about 3 years to complete your 100,000. So you just figure how you want to do it. And the other way, he says, is you could prostrate 3 times to each Buddha. And that way you'd have 105 prostrations. Or figure out your own way of counting and doing it. And there's also information in here about how to do prostrations and how to make the most of your prostrations. I don't know if you've heard this before, but apparently it's said in the sutras something about how the atoms of earth under your body, from where you are down to the core of the earth, that many atoms you create, I don't know how much merit. The more atoms, the more merit, something like that. Have you heard that before? So she says, so it's really good to have a big body. Yeah, this way or that way or both ways, because then your body will cover a lot more atoms and you get a lot more merit. And I was wondering today, looking at Matt's hair, I was wondering if hair counts as well. So maybe you don't want to cut your hair until after the retreat. Anyway, but yeah, the important thing is to do them well and do them sincerely, and Yeah. And then just complete the rest of the practice. Oh, and so when you finish the prostrations, then you read the rest of the prayer and dedicate. And it's also good, if you can, to do this other practice, the general confession. It's optional, but it's usually done here after the 35 Buddhas, the general confession. And then at the conclusion of the practice, you visualize, well, actually, while reciting, while prostrating and reciting, you visualize light flowing from all the Buddhas into you and all the sentient beings around you. And this light purifies all the imprints of destructive actions and all afflictions. And then when you've completed the whole thing, then you visualize all the other Buddhas, 34 Buddhas, dissolving into Shakyamuni Buddha. And then he comes to your crown, melts into golden light, comes down to your heart. Really feel confident that all your negativities have been purified. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche says it's also good at the end to meditate on emptiness. Because that's, again, the most powerful antidote, opponent to negativities. So even just to say the words, just spend a few moments thinking about emptiness, like the emptiness of the I, who has done this negative actions. There's no inherently existing I, and the actions that were done, the karma that was created, and so on. That's also empty of inherent existence. And then objects in relation to which we created these actions, or empty of inherent existence. So the circle of the three spheres of subject, action, and object are all empty. So spending a bit of time contemplating that emptiness, whatever you understand of that, is very, very powerful and beneficial. So that's just a little bit of information about that practice. Any questions?
I've heard the community sometimes guide, when they're giving the different descriptions of the 5 Buddha families, of attributing different qualities or afflictions like anger to a red Buddha, or different, does someone know what those are? Or can you?
When Khetser Monda taught this many, many years ago here, each Buddha purifies a particular affliction that drives the action. That's my understanding. So the blue Buddhas are anger, white is ignorance, yellow is miserliness or pride, red is attachment, and green is jealousy.
Yeah, well, that's the 5 Buddha families in Tantra. They say each of these Buddhas represents the purification of a different affliction. Right. So, yeah.
And there's a wisdom that's attributed to each one of them and other things, right?
Yeah. I think I have... There's a chart.
Anger for blue.
I'll send you a chart. There's a chart that
really
tells each of the 5 Buddhas which aggregate they are the purification of, which wisdom they are the representative of, which affliction they purify, and so on. Yeah. Amoga Siddhi is jealousy. Green. That's easy to remember. We talk about green with jealousy. So Amoga Siddhi, green, purifies jealousy. And Amitabha is attachment, on fire with desire. And I don't know the others. Ratnasambhava is miserliness. Yellow, miserliness. Is there some connection there?
Or pride. Two of them.
And
Varchana is ignorance, and then
Varchana, Kshobi
is anger.
Yeah. So that's one explanation, but then also, like in here, each individual Buddha, each of the 35 Buddhas purifies certain, I think it also mentions certain afflictions. But no, I've never had time to really learn all of these. I just figure, okay, I'm purifying all of these things with these Buddhas.
attest, at least on some level for me, is I used to just purify the actions when we think about the circumstance. When I finally started to say, well, what kind of mind propelled me to do that? Then I started to see patterns in my particular types of destructive actions that went with different afflicted states of mind. So it's really helpful to put those two together.
Yeah, the afflictions and the actions. Sure.
So this is getting into the nitty-gritty. If I'm sick, what's the minimum requirement, and how would I do that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So if you're doing the ngundro, you're counting, you're trying to accumulate 100,000. You don't have to do them all in the same place. You do with Vajrasattva, like to accumulate 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, you're supposed to do it all in the same seat and do one session every day at least. So with prostrations, you don't have to be in the same place to accumulate all of them, but you do have to do at least one or two a day. I'm trying to remember, it's in here somewhere. I think you have to do at least 3 prostrations, and if you can't do a full body prostration, like if you're on an airplane for 24 hours or something, you can at least do this. This counts as prostration. Or if you're sick, yeah, this is the minimum.
But is there a mental component with that, like purification part, or just refuge?
Well, I mean, it would be good to do the practice, even if you're sick or on an airplane. You could read the practice, do it to the best of your ability. At least say the words and try to do this. Just to keep that continuity going, because it's, ideal not. I mean, sometimes they say if you break, then you have to start all over again. You don't want to do that. So good to keep some continuity going.
So reading that screen that's up, I'm getting the idea that you do the rest of the dedication during retreat and without the prostrations, or with the prostrations?
Sorry, you do
the confession of ethical downfalls portion and the general confession. Would you continue doing the prostrations in the retreat, like the way the slide is laid out? Am I taking it too literally?
Well, you can. You can continue prostrating the whole way. The names of the Buddhas, the rest of the prayer, and the general confession. If you know it by heart, you can prostrate the whole time through all of those prayers. If you don't know the prayers by heart, then once you've finished reciting the names and prostrating to the Buddhas, then it's actually, I have the idea that you kneel down, like when we take precepts, you kneel on your right knee and read the rest of the prayer and the general confession, kneeling down like that. And then the dedication is at the end. Yeah, there's a section in this book, I haven't had time to read it all, but he does talk about how you can do your session of 35 Buddha practice in the context of another practice. For example, the Lama Chupa, if you're doing Guru Puja, you do it at a certain point. Or the Gadan Lagema, that's the practice of Lama Tsongkhapa. So at a certain point, when you get to the prostration part, you stop, get up, do this practice, and then you sit down and do the rest. So that's one way of doing it, but another way is just do this as a complete practice in itself, starting with refuge and bodhicitta, going all the way to the end and dedicating merits. So there's probably many different ways of doing it.